Hilchos Issurei Biah, Perek Chi'i, the laws of forbidden relationships, chapter 9. Today the topic is going to be another rabbinic injunction in the context of the laws of Nida. And the way the Rambam introduces this concept, which is on the screen, the concept of the kesem, a stain, the Rambam goes as follows. Let's see Halacha Aleph right inside, and then we'll see what the sages are contributing. Ein ha'isha mistama min ha'Torah benida ay beziva. A woman, biblically, can only become ritually impure as a nida or a zava. Nida or zava is menstrual sighting at a regular time or irregular blood flow. Ad shetargish v'tira dam v'yetze bivsara. Until she feels a physical sensation. This is not what we call today PMS, premenstrual cramps. This is an actual sensation where a woman was so in tune with her body that she can feel her uterus opening. The commentaries and most authorities say today this doesn't exist. But according to the Rambam, it was an integral requirement of biblical impurity. She needs to feel the physical sensation inside her body, see blood, and the blood should at least expel into her flesh. As we explained in earlier chapters, that it has to at least enter the vaginal canal, and certainly if it leaves the canal. That's the basic biblical law of impurity. Biblically as well, when a woman experiences a regular menstrual blood flow, she only becomes impure from that moment going forward. What if a woman didn't have the physical sensation? But she conducted an internal inspection and she found the blood inside the vaginal canal. She could presume that it came along with the physical sensation, as we explained, even if she doesn't feel it. But the fact that she did an internal inspection reveals that there probably was a sensation accompanying that sighting. That's the biblical law. And now that Rambam turns to the subject of today's chapter, the addition that the rabbis made to this law. Or Medivrei Seifrim, the rabbi said, Shekol haraya kesem dam al besarai al begodeha, that if a woman sees a blood stain on her flesh or on her clothing, afal pisha lo hirgisha, afal pisha badka atzma v'lo matzadam, even if she has no physical sensation, she checked herself internally and finds no blood, harezu tmeya uki'ilu matzadam lifnim bibsara. She is considered to be impure, as though a woman who found blood inside her flesh. Now, of course, this impurity is only in doubt. Shema kesem zeh midam hacheder ba. Perhaps this stain came from inside the uterus. Perhaps it didn't. That's why it's a rabbinic stringency. It's not a biblical law, but the rabbi said you should also consider a stain to be like blood sighting. And that's what most of the chapter today is going to be about, defining the parameters of the stain, which stains are impure, etc. But before we get there, the Rambam also adds, the rabbis also decreed Shekol haraya dam b'loy eis vesta, b'chol haraya kesa, and that if a woman sees blood not during the time of her veset, veset, as we learned yesterday at length, is the established pattern that a woman makes for sighting, where every month she can expect at a certain interval to see blood. But if she bleeds not during that time, as well as a woman who finds a blood stain, tmeya lemafreya ad esrin v'arba shois, she's impure retroactively for 24 hours. In other words, in Halacha 1, the Rambam said that biblically women are only impure going forward. But here, because you're discovering blood in a way other than sighting, it's a stain, or it's the wrong time, the unnatural time for sighting. So perhaps the impurity began before you discovered it. And the rabbi said we go back 24 hours. And whatever she has touched, or whatever she has come in contact with during those last 24 hours, become impure, like would usually become impure from a nida. However, if she conducted an internal inspection during 24 hours and found herself to be pure, we don't push the impurity back before that. We say she's impure retroactively till the time of the last inspection. In other words, the way to say it would be you go back either 24 hours or to the last inspection, whichever one comes first. So you see it on the screen. You have blood sighting on Sunday at 9 o'clock. You have blood sighting on Monday at 9 o'clock. Here's where she sees the stain or the unnatural sighting. So we go back and we say she's impure up to Sunday 9 o'clock. And whatever she touched or whatever food she handled during this time is impure unless she made an inspection later on the timeline. Then the impurity only goes back to the time of the inspection. Even though in this case the woman is retroactively impure. Rabbinically, while she makes everything she touched or came in contact with impure, but if somebody had relations with her during those last 24 hours, retroactively they do not become impure. That person who had relations doesn't become impure. Additionally, the count, as we saw the other day, The count that a woman needs to observe, the 7-11 calendar that a woman has to know if she's seeing blood at a natural or unnatural time, those counts only continue from the moment that she sees the blood or finds the blood stain. While we make her impure retroactively, the count doesn't move back retroactively. The chol haraya kesem, as a matter of fact, and when a woman has a blood stain, her count actually gets ruined. Maybe the blood comes from the uterus, and that messes up her established pattern of sighting. As we saw yesterday, when a woman has an established pattern of sighting and then changes the date, that can change the whole trajectory of her established patterns. A stain does the same, and it messes up her count. She now does not know where to determine or how to determine her established patterns of sighting. This is one of the reasons that the Rambam will tell us in chapter 11 that the sages later in time did an overhaul, a complete overhaul on the whole topic of how we govern blood that a woman sees and stains that a woman sees, because it caused so much confusion. So now we have two rabbinic decrees. We have a decree that stains are considered like blood, and we have a decree that stains and unnatural sighting times also put a woman retroactively impure. So before we go into the details of the actual laws, the Rambam talks about some women to whom these laws don't even apply to. Haraya dam b'shas vesta, when a woman sees blood during the time of her established pattern to see. So since she's expected to see blood right then, her impurity doesn't extend back retroactively, it only goes forward from the time and onward, because it's her normal time to see blood. So too a pregnant woman, a nursing woman, a virgin or an elderly woman, the Rambam will soon define these terms, dayan shaitan. Their moment is enough, which means their impurity, if they see blood, only goes from this moment and on, ve'enan mitamis lemafreya, and does not go backwards. The Rambam defines now the four women. What classifies as a pregnant woman? When the fetus begins to show, which is 3 months in. Menika, what qualifies as a nursing woman? For the first 24 months after childbirth. Even if for whatever reason she's not nursing. Even if her son died, she weaned him, she gave him to a wet nurse. Doesn't matter. She's in 24 months. If she sees blood, it only goes from now on and not backward. Halacha hey besula, what qualifies as a virgin? A woman who never had menstrual bleeding in her days. Even if she bled for other reasons, because of marriage, hymenal bleeding, or because of birth, as long as it wasn't menstrual blood, any blood she sees going forward only makes her impure going forward and not backwards. Zikena, an elderly woman, what qualifies as an elderly woman? Kolsha avru aleha tishim yaim samuch liziknasa. When 90 days pass, and the commentators explain, 90 days pass with no bleeding after she reaches old age, then any blood that she'll have afterwards will only go forward and not backward. Now what's called old age? The Ve'ezehi zikna, what's called, when does she become considered elderly? If she's called elderly by her friends, or somebody calls her an old woman and she isn't particular, that's how you know you've become an old woman. Now that we've talked about the laws of regular blood sighting for these women, that it only goes forward and not backward, what about a stain? It says that Rambam for the first three, the pregnant, nursing, and elderly, kisman kiri'iyasan. Their stains are treated like their regular blood sighting. If they discover a stain on their clothing or on their flesh, it doesn't make them impure going backwards, retroactively only going forwards. However, Besula, a virgin, who never saw blood, menstrual blood ever, and she's still a minor, she's even more lenient. Kisma toher ad shetira dam shalish v'sasais. Any stain she discovers is totally pure till she has a basic menstrual period of 3 successive months. That puts her even in the game of a regular woman, and only then will her stains begin to transmit ritual impurity. But before then, her stains are totally lenient, totally pure. Halacha vav, let's get into the stains itself. Ma bein kesem hanimtzal besara lekesem hanimtzal bigda. What is the practical difference between a stain found on flesh or on clothing? It says that the primary difference is the size. Shehakesem hanimtzal besara ein lo yishir. A stain discovered on the flesh has no minimum size. It's automatically impure. But a stain discovered on clothing only becomes or only creates an impure status when it's the size of the kilki bean. Gris is a bean. Kilki is a region in Turkey. You can see it here on the screen. This region here in Turkey, the Rambam writes elsewhere that the beans here grew very large, and they were used as the sign for a nida blood stain. Today, the authorities accept that it's the size of a dime, a 10-cent coin. Shehu meruba sheyesh by kedei teisha adashes. Shalish al shalish. It's a square that has the area of 9 lentil beans, 3 by 3. Only that size makes a stain on a piece of clothing impure as a nida. Haya pachis mishir zeh tahar. If it's less than this amount, it's impure. Nimtza tipin tipin. If the stain is discovered to be in a bunch of drops on a piece of clothing, ein mitzdarfish, they don't combine. Haya aru chareza mitzdarif. But if it's long, even if it isn't square or round, the area combines to the size of a kilki bean. Halacha zayin, another leniency with regard to stains. Kesem shenimtzal davar she'enim mekabel tuma. If a stain is discovered on an article which is not susceptible to impurity, tahar ve'eino cheshashes loy. The stain is pure. The woman need not worry about it. In the 10th book of the Rambam, we're going to get a whole lengthy treatment of this concept. Only certain types of utensils, certain types of materials are susceptible to ritual impurity. Others, if they're touched by a corpse or a dead animal or an impure person, they don't become impure. The Rambam will list some examples now. But keep in mind, we're going to get the full treatment of this later. Ketzad, what does this mean? Yashval klei avanim. Klei adama u klei glalim. If a woman sat on a stone article, or an earth article, or an article made out of dung, animal manure, oyal oir hadog, or on fish skin, oyal kli cheres migaboy, or on a pottery vessel on its outside, because pottery can only become impure from its inside, but on its outside it's like a regular vessel that cannot contract impurity. Oyal beged she'in boy shalishetz boys al shalishetz boys, or it's on a piece of clothing which doesn't have the size of 3 by 3 finger breadths. That's the minimum size for a piece of clothing to contract ritual impurity. V'nimtza lehen dam, and after the woman sits on these articles, she gets up and there's blood under them. Tahira, she's pure, even though there's no other place where the stain could have come from. But it's on a ritually pure article, the stain is pure. Afilu badka hakarka v'yashva Allah. Even if the woman first inspected the ground and only then sat down, v'nimtza kesam ala karka kesha'amda, and she finds a stain on the ground after she gets up, harizu tahira, it's pure. Shekol she'enim mekabel tuma le'gazru al kesam she'imatzei bay. Any article which cannot contract ritual impurity, the sages never imposed their decree on it. The leibe mekabel tuma. The Rambam goes even further. Even articles which are susceptible to ritual impurity, the sages never made their decree of stains, unless it was white. But colored garments, colored utensils. We don't worry at all for a blood stain found on them. Therefore, the sages enacted that women should always wear colored garments. And in today's day and age, it's accepted that they wear colored undergarments, so you don't get into the issues. To protect her from problems that could arise because of the laws of stains. As I said, a matter of fact, today also the women do this. They always wear colored undergarments, besides for the 7 clean days, when they have to make sure that they're not bleeding at all, so then they have to wear white undergarments. But other than that, they should only wear colored to avoid these problems. Says the Rambam Malacha Ches, let's talk about the parameters of these stains. Not just any place where the blood is found on her flesh will make her impure as a bloodstain. It must be discovered in a place opposite the genital area. Ketzad, what does that look like? Woman discovers blood on her heel, she's impure. Perhaps the heel came in contact with the genital area when she sat down. In those days, they didn't sit on chairs; they sat on rugs and cushions on the floor. It's very possible that when she adjusted her position, her heel would touch the area where the blood would come out of. Same if the blood is discovered on her thigh, her inner thigh, or her inner calf. The places on her body which stick to each other when she stands and puts one foot next to the other, one thigh next to the other, then she's impure because the blood could have very reasonably come from her genital area onto her inner leg. If the woman discovers blood on the tip of her big toe, she's also impure. Perhaps blood dripped from the uterus onto the toe when she was walking. Any place on the body where it's possible for the menstrual blood to sprinkle when she's walking, and blood is indeed discovered there, she's impure. So too if the blood is found on her hands, even on the back, the joints of her fingers, then she's impure. We have a principle in halacha: hands are active; they go places without you even realizing. And so it's very possible that the woman was bleeding menstrually and her hands touched that blood. But if the blood was discovered on the outer thighs and the outer calves, or on the sides, not the parts that are on the inside, needless to say, if the blood was discovered above her thighs, she's pure. Because this is nothing but blood that was sprinkled upon her from another place. It's not a menstrual stain. What if a blood stain is discovered on her flesh in a place where it's reasonable that it came from the genital area, but it doesn't look that way? The shape seems to indicate otherwise. It's long like a strap. Or it's round, or it's in droplets. The length of the stain went against the width of the thigh. Shouldn't have looked that way if it came from the genital area. Or it looks like it's going from the bottom up, not like a stain that came from the top down. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, since the bottom line is that it's opposite the genital area, she's impure. We don't go and start logically analyzing and saying, had it dripped from the body, it wouldn't look this way. We don't say that. Any blood that's discovered on these areas, we are strict, even though it's only a doubt. That's as far as a stain on her flesh. On her clothing, says the Rambam, a stain discovered on a woman's clothing, below the belt is impure, above the belt is pure. If it's discovered on her sleeve, if the area on the sleeve where it's discovered reaches the area of the genital area when she moves around her hands, it could reach there, she's impure, because the hands are busy, they move around. But if not, and it's unreasonable to assume that it came from the menstrual area, she's pure. Halacha Yud Aleph. If she was accustomed to removing her clothing and using it as a blanket by night, then any place where she discovers the blood will of course make her impure, because the blanket shifts positions all night and the blood could be anywhere. So to her belt, wherever you find the blood on the belt, makes it impure. Halacha Yud Beis. What if she had one garment that she wore, and it was on her for 3 days or more, not in the time of her nida? We remember the 7-11 calendar. When a woman sees blood during these 7 days, anytime, she's considered impure for all 7. But in the blue days, in the 11 irregular days, if a woman sees blood for just 1 day, she only has to compensate for that with 1 clean day. Once the blood goes for 3 consecutive days, now she requires 7 spotless days to undo that impurity. So how does that law reflect itself with regard to stains? Says the Rambam, she has a cloak. She's wearing it for 3 days, beloy eis nidasa, not in the time of the nida, in times of the ziva, the blue days. Ubadka umatza alav shleisha ksamim. And then, after 3 days, she checks the garment and she finds 3 stains. Or 1 big stain that has the size of 3 stains. Now she doesn't know. Did all the stains come on 1 day? She's only impure as a minor zava, a 1-day impurity. Or perhaps they came on 3 separate days, and she's a real zava. Harezus fake zava, says the Rambam, she's in doubt whether she's a full zava or not. Shema kesem natav mimeno b'chol yom. Perhaps a stain did indeed drop from her 1 day, 1 stain per day. Same thing if she had 3 cloaks. Each one was checked before she wore it. She knows they're clean before she put them on. And they were on her for 3 days in her ziva days. And she finds a stain on each one. Even though on the cloaks the stains are in different areas opposite each other, so it's unreasonable logically to say that they all came from the same bleeding. Harezus fake zava. Bottom line, we have 3 stains. We have to assume she's in doubt. Perhaps she's a zava. Halacha Yud Gimel, matzah kesem echad she'ein boi kedei shleisha ksamim. What if she finds 1 stain not big enough, doesn't have the size of 3 separate stains? Let's say the size of a dime. So there's not 3 dime sizes of blood on the cloak. So logic would immediately say, well, it's not big enough to be 3 days. On the other hand, though, as the commentaries say, perhaps the stains piled one on top of each other. And there really is material for 3 stains, but you just don't see it. So here the Rambam says it depends on whether the woman had verified her own status. If she had done at least an internal inspection, she checked herself for the entire duration of twilight after the first day. This is what's called in today's literature a moch, where a woman takes a cloth and inserts it into the genital area and leaves it there from sunset till nightfall. So it's there the entire duration of bein hashmashot, and she finds it to be pure. So she knows that on day one she's for sure pure. V'loi badka chaluka, but she hadn't checked the clothing. An internal inspection, but not the cloak where the stains are on. Then on day 3 she finds this stain that isn't the combined size of 3 stains. So then we go with the first option. We say since there aren't 3 dime sizes of stains, it wasn't a stain that accumulated over 3 days. And there's no need to worry for being a ziva because she checked herself on the first day and she knows that she's pure. But if she didn't have this check to ascertain her status during the entire twilight of the first day, since the bottom line is she didn't check her cloak and she was wearing it for 3 days during the ziva days, she must worry about being perhaps a zava, even though again the size of the stain isn't the combined size of 3 dimes. Doesn't matter. So before, the commentaries say we assume that the stains piled one on top of the other. Halacha Yudalit. Till now we talked about siding separately and stains separately. What about when they interplay? Matza kesem al chaluka hayoim, v'ra sadam achar kach shnei yamim ze achar ze. She finds a stain on her cloak one day. So using this calendar, on day 1 she has a stain over here. Then she actually sees blood on day 2 and on day 3. Or she sees blood for 2 days, and on the 3rd day finds a stain. She's in doubt whether she's a zava or not. Now the Rambam introduces another law related to stains and siding. Says the Rambam, if a woman sees a stain, and then a short time afterwards she sees actual blood siding. So if we treat the stain as a full blood siding, and we count it separate to the second sighting, that can have an effect on the amount of days to make her into a zava. Let's say she finds a stain over here on day 1, and then shortly after, the Rambam will define shortly as 24 hours, within 24 hours, but it's the next day, she sees blood. Should we combine the two or not? Says the Rambam, Toila kisma bir'iyasa kol me'es le'es. So long as the stain and the sighting came within 24 hours, we can attribute the stain to the sighting and make the count only begin from the later sighting. Whether she had done an internal inspection when she originally found the stain, and found herself to be pure, or whether she did not check herself. As long as the stain and the sighting are in 24 hours, they combine to one and we go with the sighting. But if a woman sees a stain and then afterwards another stain, within 24 hours, she cannot combine, she cannot attribute one stain to the next, unless she conducts an internal inspection between them. Because if she can ascertain that there was a state of purity internally between the 2 stains, then the original stain will be discounted. We're not going to put it into the count because she knows that internally she was pure after the first stain was discovered. And therefore she cannot combine the 2 stains. And now that Rambam will illustrate this at length. Halacha tazayin ketzad. What does this look like? Ra'asa kesem erev Shabbos b'shar rishona min hayom. A woman has a stain sighting on Friday, first hour into the day. 7 a.m. she finds a stain. She's a working woman. She has to rush to work. She has no time to do an internal inspection. Even though she didn't inspect herself, she doesn't know if she's actually pure or impure. All she has is a stain. She doesn't know what's going on inside. And then she sees blood afterwards. Any time between 7 a.m. on Friday, up to 7 a.m. on Shabbos morning. She doesn't attribute anything to the stain. She attributes the stain to the sighting, and her count begins from the sighting on Friday night or Shabbos early morning. And therefore, only if she'll then see blood again on Sunday and on Monday, will she be a zava. Not just Sunday, because the Friday kesem, the Friday stain, won't count. But if the blood sighting only came on Shabbat morning at 8 a.m., so now the 24-hour window it's bigger than a 24-hour window between the stain and the sighting. Now the stain and the sighting do not go together, and she actually has an impurity working to her disadvantage for 2 days. Erev Shabbos shematza Biah kesem, u'b'Shabbos she'ra'asa Adam. The Friday where she discovered the stain, and then Shabbos where she just actually saw the blood. Because both of them aren't in a combined 24-hour period. And then, the moment she'll see a third day of blood setting on Sunday, she'll already have to worry about being a zava, because now she has 3 days of combined sighting in her irregular time. But if it wasn't blood that she sighted on the Shabbos day, she discovered another stain in the first hour on Shabbos day. So 7 a.m. on Friday, she sees a blood stain. 7 a.m. on Shabbos, she sees another blood stain. So then, if she actually internally inspected herself on Friday and she discovered that she's pure, so now since she knows that on Friday she was pure at one point, she only begins the count, or she only considers it to be counted for one stain, the one that she found on Shabbos. Since both stains were discovered within 24 hours and she checked herself, so we move to the second stain. But if she hadn't checked herself, she has no way to know whether or not there was an interruption of purity between the two sightings of the two stains. She needs to include in the count the stain which she saw on Friday. And therefore, the moment she sees blood on Sunday, she now has 3 days to take into account: the stain on Friday, the stain on Shabbos, and the sighting on Sunday. That's already enough for her to suspect perhaps she is a zava. Halacha Yudches. What if the second stain was discovered not within 24 hours, but after 24 hours, already the second hour of Shabbos, 8 a.m.? Bein badka, bein loy badka. So here, whether or not she conducted an internal inspection, we have to consider her to be impure for 2 separate days, because both stains did not come within one period of 24 hours. And therefore, if she were to see another blood sighting on Sunday, after the 24 hours, she already suspects that perhaps she is a zava. What if it's a third stain, not a sighting? So stain on Friday, stain on Shabbos after 24 hours, so they're obviously 2 separate ones, and now a stain on Sunday, a third stain. And same rules. If she's certain that there was a state of purity in between them, in other words, she actually checked herself, ein mitzdarfin, they don't combine. The eino cheshashas lezivos, and no suspicion for ziva. But if she hadn't checked herself, then indeed she must suspect that perhaps she is a zava, because now she has 3 stains in a row, 3 sightings in a row makes you a zava. Says the Rambam Halacha Yutes, a general rule about stains. Kol kesem sha'amarnu she'itmea biglalai. Any time in the last 18 halachot where we said that a woman would be impure because of a stain, im yesh la davar lislois bay v'leimar. If she has anything to blame it on, any outside factor to blame it on, and to say, shema kesem zeh midavar pleinihu, maybe the stain didn't come from inside, it came from that outside factor. Im nimtza al habeged harezu tehira. If the stain that we're talking about is on a piece of clothing, that's enough of a reason to make her pure. We can blame it on outside circumstance. Shalei amru chachamim badavar lahachmir ela lahakil. The sages never meant to be extra stringent with this. Rather, in any case of doubt, we go lenient. If it's on the flesh, then it's harder to blame it on outside factors. The doubt is considered to be impure. We cannot blame on the other circumstances. If, of course, the outside factors themselves determine that you should be more blaming in the case of where it's found on the flesh than where it's found on the garment, in other words, there's more of a reason to assume that an outside blood ended up on her flesh, then she could, of course, blame the stain on her flesh on the outside factor, and out of doubt, we're going to consider her to be pure. Ketzad, what would this look like, practically speaking? If the woman herself had slaughtered an animal, or a beast, or a bird, woman can do shchita. If she did, so of course, she's probably full of blood. Yeah, a woman can slaughter. If she did the shchita, so now she's obviously, presumably, lots of blood around her. Or she was checking cloths. other women were bringing their bloodstained cloths to her. Or she sat next to somebody who was dealing with these bloody stuff. Or she passed through a butcher's market, and now she finds blood on her clothing. Tahira, well, we can assume she's pure, and she blames those things that the stain came from that. You know why I have a stain on my clothing? Because I shechted an ox. It's going to be a lot of blood. But if the stain is only found on her flesh, then it's different. If the stain is below the belt, it's impure. If she had flipped or jumped around, then even if it's above the belt, it's impure. The fact that it's on her flesh is a giveaway. Because if really the blood is coming from the slaughtering or from the market, the blood should have also been discovered on her clothing. Why is there no blood on her clothing, only on her flesh? Since it's found only on her flesh, not on her clothing, so we can assume she's impure. Here is the case where we could find something to blame on the flesh if she had a wound. Even if it began to heal, there's a scab. If the scab is still fresh enough that if you were to peel it away, it would still bleed, and now she finds blood on her flesh, she can blame it on the wound. Anything similar, also the same thing. There's logical reason to blame it on the flesh, so the flesh becomes a reason to be lenient, not to be strict. If the stain was found on her clothing and on her flesh together, now she can blame any factors, because it's on her clothes and on her body. There's much more reason to be lenient. She can also blame it on a louse. We had this concept before in these laws. So maybe when she sat down, she killed a louse, and this blood is from a louse. Till what size of blood stain? Can you blame it on a louse? Ad kegris, till the size of that bean, the dime here. But if the stain she found is larger than the size of the dime of the Cilician bean, then she cannot blame it on the louse. Even if you see a louse stuck to the stain, since it's larger than a bean, you cannot blame it on the louse. The sages had a tradition that out of a louse only comes maximum this dime size of blood. If it's bigger than a dime, even if there's a louse right there, you can't be lenient. A woman can also blame her son or her husband for the reason why there's blood on her clothing or on her flesh. If they were dealing with bloody things, if their hands were dirty, if they had a wound, she can blame them and say, they touched her. Children touched the mother. Husband and wife touch. So maybe he touched me. And it's coming from them, not from me. Again, the sages are lenient. If you have a reason to blame it. Don't say it's a nida bloodstain. While we can blame external factors for why we see blood on one area, we cannot blame those external factors for blood moving from place to place. Follow this. Ketzad. What does that look like? She has an open wound on her shoulder. And she finds a stain on her thigh. We don't blame the wound on the shoulder and say, maybe her hand touched the wound on the shoulder and the hand carried the blood to the thigh. Because that's now blaming an external factor and also saying that the blood moved. You can't do both steps. Same thing, anything similar, we don't blame on this. Whether it's her body or her clothing, it's not a reason to find or to blame this outside circumstance. You have two women that are dealing with one bird. They're both inspecting it or dissecting it or whatever they're doing. We know that in this bird, there's only blood the size of a sela. It's a coin. And then each woman discovers on her flesh or on her clothing a stain the size of a sela. Both of them couldn't have come from the bird. They're both impure, because each one has to assume she's the one who also had menstrual bleeding. If she was dealing with blood, a single woman, she's alone. She's dealing with blood which can only maximum produce a stain the size of a gris, size of a bean. And she finds a stain double that size. She can blame the stain on two outside factors. One bean size is the blood I'm dealing with, and one bean size is a louse that was killed. I don't have to attribute any of them to menstrual blood. But if the stain is bigger than two bean sizes, then all your factors are out. You can't blame a louse and the blood if there's more than the size that they can both produce. If a woman is dealing with red blood, she cannot blame outside factors relating to black blood. If she's dealing with a bird that has multiple shades of blood, and one of the shades is found on her, she can blame it, even though you would think that she should find multiple shades on her clothing. Why is she only finding one shade? Doesn't matter. If there's one shade here and it matches one of the bird's shades, it's okay. A woman was wearing 3 layers of clothing. The sages were very lenient. If it's a case where you can blame an outside factor, you can blame it even if you only discover blood on the innermost cloak. And if there's no room for blaming on the outside factor, she cannot blame it even if she only discovers blood on the outside cloak, which should surely indicate that it came from the outside. Doesn't matter. Ketzad, what does this look like? Avra b'shuk shel tabachim, if a woman passed through a butcher's market wearing these 3 cloaks, even though the stain is only discovered on the innermost cloak, which makes no sense. If the blood came from the butchery, it should for sure be on the outer garments as well. She can still blame it on the butcher's blood. If the commentaries explain, perhaps her 2 outer cloaks got raised, and then the butcher's blood only came into the inner cloak. If she hadn't passed through the butcher's market or anything like it, so there's no outside factor to blame over here, even if the stain is only discovered on the upper cloak, she's still impure. Safek avra, safek loy avra, safek nisaska, safek loy nisaska. If she's in a doubt whether or not she went through the butcher's market, or whether or not she was dealing with blood that can produce a stain, she cannot blame her blood on those doubtful circumstances. A city where pigs roam around, or they're constantly coming to the city, we never have to worry about stains discovered on clothing because pigs typically eat these creepy crawly animals that are always producing blood, and they roam around the human beings and could probably make the cloaks dirty with blood. A woman lends her piece of clothing, her cloak, to a woman who is for sure a nida. Whether she's Gentile or Jew. And then, after lending it out, she puts it on again before she personally checks it. So she has no idea what happened to it while the other woman was wearing it. And then she finds a stain. She can blame the stain on the nida. Nidas typically bleed. No reason to assume it came from me when I just lent it to a woman who was for sure bleeding. If she lent it to a woman who was a minor zava on the day she's impure, that means she saw blood for one day irregularly, and on that day, this woman lent her the cloak. Or she lent the cloak to a woman who is in her state of pure blood. She's in her free-for-all days after giving birth. Such a woman, even if she bleeds, she remains pure. Or to a virgin, whose blood is also considered pure, she can blame those other women and say, the blood didn't come from me, the blood came from those women who I lent the cloak to. But if she lent it to a minor zava on the day which she's guarding, she's trying not to bleed on this day, she wants to compensate for her day of bleeding, or she lent it to a major zava during her 7 clean days, and she wears it again, the lender wears the cloak, before checking it, and finds a stain, both women are now messed up. The borrower and the lender. both women are in a state where they shouldn't be bleeding. Now there's a stain, both have to worry it's theirs. Shema mizu, shema mizu. Maybe it came from this one or from that one. If a woman lent her cloak to another woman who was in 7 spotless days, not over blood sighting, but over a blood stain sighting, now she cannot blame this stain on that woman who, to begin with, is only impure because of a stain. Because we don't attribute one stain to another. The whole last law was talking about a case where she didn't check. She didn't inspect the cloak. What if she inspected the cloak and she inspected herself and she finds herself to be pure? She lends the cloak to her friend that she knows is 100% clean, and the friend wears it. And she finds a stain upon receiving it back. The borrower is impure. And she cannot blame it on the owner of the cloak. Because the lender checked it before she gave it to her. Last thing you know before she gave it is that it's clean. There's a stain now. The borrower certainly bled. A tall woman wears the cloak of a short woman and finds a stain. If the cloak reaches the tall woman's genital area, she is impure. If not, and of course she's pure, the stain must belong to the short woman. It cannot belong to the tall woman because the stain was discovered above her waist. Lamed Beis, Shalish Nashim, Shalavshu Chaluk Echad, Zu Achar Zu, V'achar Kach Nimtza Alav Kesem. 3 women wore the same cloak, one after the other, and afterwards a stain is found. Who's impure? V'cheinim Yeshenis B'mita Achas Ke'achas, V'nimtza Dam Tachas Achas Me'an. 3 women slept in one bed together, and blood is discovered under one of them. Kulan Tmeyas, they're all impure. The Rambam will soon define this law. It's only if they came up on the bed from the same side. If immediately upon discovering the stain, one of the women did an internal inspection and revealed that she is impure, the other 2 can say that they're pure. Because look, one of them just checked herself and she's impure. But it has to be right away. And the commentaries debate if this is going on both cases or only one, the case of the bed and the case of the cloak, or just one of them. But either way, an immediate inspection makes the other 2 pure. Lamed Gimel, Badku Kulanu Matsu Atzman Tahairais. If all the women checked themselves and found that they're pure, so something doesn't add up. There's a stain on the bed, stain on the cloak. Each woman checks herself and she's pure. What do you do? Toila Misha Eina Ru'uya Liras Dam, but Misha Hi Ru'uya. So first you look at the woman's status. Which one should be bleeding and which one should not? V'tiya she'eina ru'uya tahira v'haru'uya tameya. The woman who shouldn't be bleeding is pure. The woman who should is impure. What does that mean? Keitzad. What does that look like? Haisa achas me'uberes v'achas eina me'uberes. If one woman is pregnant and one is not, ha'me'uberes tahira v'she'eina me'uberes tameya. The pregnant is pure. She shouldn't be bleeding now. And the woman who's not pregnant is going to be impure, even though she inspected herself and she's pure. But somebody's got to take the blame. Minika v'she'eina minika, a nursing woman, and one is not nursing, it means 24 months since childbirth, ha'minika tahira, the nursing one is pure. Zekeina v'she'eina zekeina tahira. One is elderly, one is not, the elderly is pure. Besula v'she'eina besula tahira. One is virgin, one is not, the virgin is pure. Hayu kulan mu'ubarais, kulan zekeinais, kulan minikais, kulan besulais. If they're all in a state where they shouldn't be seeing blood, they're all pregnant, they're all elderly, they're all nursing, they're all virgin, hare kulan tmeyais, they're all going to be considered impure for lack of a better situation. You found the stain. We don't know whose it is. They're all pure, but someone's got to be impure, so they all have to take the potential blame. Lamed Dalet. Shalish nashim sha'alu derech margales hamita v'yashnu kulam. 3 women came up at the foot of the bed and went to sleep. So they all came up on their own spot. V'nimtza dam tachas ha'emtzais. Blood is discovered under the middle woman. Shlashtan tmeis, they're all impure because they all may have shifted slightly, and the bleeding in the center could have come from either of the 3. Tachas hapnimis, if you only find blood under the innermost woman, he v'shebetzida tmeis v'achitzeina tahira. She and the one next to her are impure. The outermost woman is pure. She couldn't have shifted that deep into the bed. Tachas achitzeina. Same thing on the other side. If you find the blood only under the outermost woman, he v'shebetzida tmeis v'hapnimis tahira. She and the one on the side of her are impure. The innermost woman is pure. If Shari ein lahem seder, but if they didn't go up at the foot of the bed, they went up without an order, the nimtza dam tachas achas mehan, and blood is discovered under any one of them, kulan tmeis, they're all impure, as we just said before, in halacha lamed beis. Lamed hey, bamed dvarim amurim, when do we say this? Shabadku kulanu matzutar. If they all inspected themselves and they found themselves to be pure. And neither one can blame her friend. But if one of the women inspects herself, finds herself to be pure, and her friend didn't check herself, the one who is pure can attribute the stain to the one who didn't check herself, and the woman who didn't check herself will be impure. Lamed Vav, a new rule about stains, and this is the concluding topic of the chapter. Kol kesem shenimtza ala beged she'en le b'ma yisle. You have a stain on a piece of clothing, and there is no external factor to blame. Einei metame ad sheyivada shehu dam. It can never pass on ritual impurity, and it won't make the woman impure unless you know for sure that it's actually blood. As the commentaries explain, when she sees the stain, she has to assume it's blood out of doubt, but she must take it to an expert to check. Anytime the sages have a doubt whether it's actual blood or just a red dye, there's a special test that you can do. You pass over it 7 cleaning agents in a specific order. If the cleaning agents cause the blood to go away, or at least lighten the shade, then we know that it's blood and she's impure. But if it remained in its color and its shade, after passing the cleaning agents over it, then it's for sure a dye and she's impure because the dye cannot get affected, only blood gets affected. These are the 7 ingredients in order. Reik tafel, saliva of a person who hasn't eaten. We'll soon define what this means. Uleisas grisin shel poil, a cooked dish of beans that has been chewed already. Umei raglayim shehechmitzu, urine that went sour. We'll soon define what that means. Ubaitis, baitis they translate here as lye. This is lye at the top here.
Soap.
It's a type of soap. That's the common translation of baitis. The Rambam in his commentary to the Mishnah gives an Arabic word. And Rav Kapach, who was known to be a great scholar of Arabic, he says that it's this plant here. On the left. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Althei officinalis, whatever. This is the plant where the lye comes from, where the baitis comes from. Could be it's not lye. According to him, it's this plant.
Or it's this thing, not necessarily lye.
Right.
Lye is a kind of...
Yes, he argues. The Neser, the common translation, is not natron or natron. That's this over here at the bottom. But the Rambam in his commentary to the Mishnah says it's a blue stone that's used for cleaning. Kimonia, common translation is cumin powder. But again, Rav Kapach writes that it's this one in the middle, this plant. Annabis satifera. Whatever you can produce from this plant is the kimonia. The ashlag is either typically translated as bleach, on the top left. Some say, again, Rav Kapach says it's this plant on the right, Saponaria officinalis. I'm probably pronouncing that totally wrong, but whatever. Whatever you produce from that plant is the ashlag. You must rub every ingredient 3 times on the cloth. You do a forward and backward motion for every rub. So forward, backward, 3 times each. If you put them on out of order or all at once, it won't work. The efficacy of the test only goes in order. If you put the last ones before the first ones, well, the last ones that you put, which are really the first ones in proper order, can count. Then put on again the last ones which you put first. Until you end up with all 7 in order. So if you put first, all these cleaning agents, these plants, and then you went back to put the spit and the chewed beans, etc., just start again and go all 7 in order. And now the Rambam defines each one. Ezahu reik tafel. What is considered to be saliva from a person who hasn't eaten? That means shalaitam klum mitchilas halayla. It's a man who didn't taste anything from the beginning of the night, and he slept the second half of the night. The next morning when he wakes up, before he eats, the saliva in his mouth is called reik tafel. It's very strong, it's very potent. Provided that he didn't speak a lot during the first 3 hours of the day, or let's say he woke up early and learned Torah, did a Rambam class before 3 hours in the day, especially today's Rambam, it's a lot of talking, then the saliva is not going to be considered so powerful. The speech cancels the strength, the potency of the saliva and makes it like water. What's called chewed beans, it's chewing a bean dish till a lot of saliva gets mixed in. Then it makes it potent. What's called sour urine, after 3 days or more. Lamites, the Rambam caps off the chapter with a general definition of the rules of a stain. Kol isha she'itmea mishum kesem. Any woman who we say is impure because of a stain, imatza ha-kesem bimei nidasa. So check the calendar and see when did she find the stain. If she found it in the nida days, the orange days, harezus fake nida, v'yesheves alav shiva yamim. She's in doubt, perhaps she's a nida. She must wait 7 days, then go to the mikvah, v'tevelas b'leil shmini, go to the mikvah on the 8th night. The achar kach tiyeh muteres lebayla, and only then will she be permitted to her husband. If she found it in the blue days, the 11 irregular days, she's in doubt whether she's a major or minor zava, as we explained in this chapter. If she's a minor zava, saw the stain 1 or 2 days, she waits for 1 day of compensation, or 7 clean days if she was a major zava, out of doubt, where she saw 3 stains in a row, or 2 stains and a sighting, as we explained in this chapter. All the laws governing this are only rabbinic, as we explained. Therefore, were a man to have relations with such a woman purposely, we can't hold them biblically accountable for relations with a nida, because we don't know if she's a nida. However, the rabbis will give him rabbinic lashes, and they are exempt from bringing a sacrifice, because they're not held accountable biblically, only rabbinically.